Hello, everybody. Okay. Waiting for the thumbs up on the live stream. We're good. All right. Thanks, everybody, for being here and joining us out there. So I've got a little bit of sweaty mask face, so bear with me. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. This is just incredible to be celebrating Asterism, a new book by Ae Hee Lee, which is tremendous. And to be doing so in incredible company with Brenda Cárdenas, Mauricio Kilwein Guevara, Olatunde Osinaike. An absurdly good lineup. Just, yeah. What did we do at Woodland Pattern to deserve that? Thank you so much for being here. I'm Mike Wendt. I'm the programming director here at Woodland Pattern. I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement and say that we at Woodland Pattern acknowledge that here in Milwaukee we live on traditional Potawatomi, Ho-Chunk, and Menominee homelands along the southwest shores of Michigami, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes, where the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Kinnickinnic rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's sovereign Anishinaabe, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Oneida, and Mohican nations remain present. We further acknowledge the grave evil colonialism introduced to these lands through genocide as well as slavery, but also via racist and xenophobic beliefs, laws, and practices that continue to inflict harm upon Black, brown, and indigenous lives. We honor those who have lived and do now at these intersections of identity and experience and are committed to the active dismantling of white supremacy. Again, thank you all. Thank you all. I have just like a couple things to say by way of announcements, and then I'll happily turn things over. One, of course, very important thing that I cannot not tell you is that we have books for sale. Of course, Asterism, also the incredible Tenderheaded by Olatunde. We have the very recently released also book Trace by Brenda Cárdenas. We have Poema and Autobiography of So-and-So by Mauricio. So collect them all, trade them with your friends. And yeah, thank you. And we have many events coming up this spring. This month in particular, just stay tuned for things beyond. But this month, next week, we're going to welcome poets Chrysanthemum and George Abraham for a reading and conversation that is guest curated, hosted, and moderated by Chingy Chen, who was, of course, at UWM doing a PhD program there. And it'll be wonderful to welcome them back, along with Chrysanthemum and George. So that'll be tremendous. That's next Thursday, March 14th, so real soon. Come back here for that. That same week, the 16th, which is a Saturday, Diana Khoi Nguyen, Cindy Juyong Ok, and Nikki Walschlager will be here for a reading Saturday, a week from today at 7 p.m. And then that's not all. Wait. And then March 23rd, we're going to welcome poet and musician Julian Talamantes Berlasky for a workshop and reading happening both on that same day. That's a Saturday, March 23rd, 2 weeks from now. And there is still space in that workshop, so do yourself a favor and inquire with us about how you might join. And then there's just it's wall to wall through April and May and June in the best way. So stay tuned for more things, but I'll stop talking about it now, and then we can turn things over to the poets, which I'm glad to do. And first among them is Brenda Cárdenas, who is the author of Trace. So I'm diving right in here to the introductions. Boomerang, and 3 chapbooks, including From the Tongues of Brick and Stone. She also co-edited Resist Much, Obey Little, inaugural poems to the resistance, and Between the Heart and the Land, Latina Poets in the Midwest. Her poems and essays have appeared in many anthologies and journals, including Latinx Poetics, The Art of Poetry, Tab, Journal of Poetry and Poetics, Kinship, Belonging in a World of Relations, Grabbed, Poets and Writers on Sexual Assault, Empowerment and Healing, Ghost Fishing, an Eco-Justice Anthology, and many others. Cárdenas has served as faculty for the Canto Mundo Writers Retreat and as Milwaukee Poet Laureate, and she currently teaches creative writing and U.S. Latinx literatures at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee for a little bit longer. Yeah. Before a well-deserved retirement. In Brenda's latest collection, Trace, the philosopher Susan Griffin is quoted, quote, "One can find traces of every life in each life." And this idea seems alive in all of Brenda's poems. Though her poetry may take the reader from universes before us, both mythic and material, all the way to a future world without us, and to many places between, there's always a connection, a conversation, whether through poetic portraiture, ekphrastic conversations with other artists, and more. There's an interpersonal intimacy that acts as an invitation to imagine possible worlds together, even as we're faced with the often impossible world we inhabit. In this place we share that is strewn with, quote, all our granular wreckage, that is scarred by the, quote, barbed wire politics of stupidity, Brenda still finds such hope and care as her words, quote, blow air into the earth's collapsing lungs. Or, as Orion Noel notes, in these darkest days, we are lucky to have the words of a writer as sustaining as Brenda Cárdenas, one who reminds us that poetry has always done the impossible. Brenda, thank you for being here and welcome.
Thank you so much, Mike and Woodland Pattern and Ae Hee for inviting me to help you celebrate this amazingly beautiful book, incredible book. So I wanted to just start by saying a few words about asterism before reading a few of my own poems. Asterism, Ae Hee Lee tells us, is a pattern of stars observed by the naked eye or a group of 3 asterisks. And I think constellation. The poems in this book form an especially intricate and enlightening one, the kind that's mysteries call the gazer out into the night, time and again, searching for it. This is a book in love with its material, language. And while we could say that about poetry in general, the rich textures and nuances of language, the slippage between languages, and the long histories of words with their transformations over time are especially poignant in Ae Hee's collection. I find myself reading extra slowly, lest I miss the slightest leap from star to star as Ae Hee traverses pueblitos, mountains, countries, continents, and selves. Every syllable and caesura, each mercurial image means, matters, and ripples long after one has cast their eyes on the next line or turned the page. Her inventiveness is key to the hold the book has on its reader. You keep thinking, wait, where did she just take me? And how did she do that? For me, Asterism is a book about the limit in which migrants and transcultural folks often dwell, about our constant transformations, about the impossibility and possibilities of translation, about longing and belonging, as she writes in the poem when a language is said to be lost, quote, belonging splits easier than an atom into being, longing, and language. Yes, I have known it to erode into dust, but also birth, a new mountain in the mouth, end quote. And although I personally haven't experienced migration as Ae Hee has, her work resonates with my own cultural syncretism. Asterism feels like a wholly new place, an ever-expanding landscape, and like home all at once. I love, and I really mean love, how closely it holds me as it transports me. If this book were a mother teaching a child to ride a bicycle, it would let her go so gently she wouldn't even realize she was riding on her own. It's just so beautiful, Ae Hee. It's so gorgeous. So I just had to say something meaningful about it. Okay, a few poems that are nowhere near that incredible. This is a new poem that is coming out in Prairie Schooner. It's called Lineage. Para la bisabuela, I never knew. Bisabuela is great-grandmother. Our lineage, 8 burros fencing a single aguacate tree in the middle of an open field. This is where you kneel. Hide behind the blinking eyes, soft bellies of a breathing shield, tails smacking at buzz-stung air. Torches burn barns to the ground behind you, daughters grasping both your hands, youngest slung across your breast like La Adelita's bandolera, all because you packed a lunch, tied a sprig of mint in your son's hat. They said he was feeding the wrong side, so they bound his hands and marched him blindfolded 3 days to the next village, where a noose wreathed his neck, feet planted like stones on a crate. What if you hadn't burst in, breathless and begging, just before they kicked it out from under him, from under the church that received his sun-beaten body, soaked rags and rang drops of water on clay lips, from under the train that hauled him north with the woman who housed seeds that would sprout ears perked for each other's screaming, when she pushed all of us into this singed world with no ring of stubborn creatures to shield us. Thank you. And I'm going to go way back to this old book and read a poem that's very interlingual, kind of in honor of Ae Hee and in the way she also moves between languages in her work. I can't translate the Spanish in this because there's just too much of it. So, you know, if you don't understand it, just sort of dance or ride the rhythms of it, right? I had written 4 poems on 4 sounds in the Spanish language, and the series is called Sound Waves. And this one is called Intensidad ñ. El campesino rolls his shoulder blades as he turns from the furrows toward the road's curve home. Otro año, otro día, otra estación. Él ha añejado con su añojal. Ñ, the yawn in mañana. La araña weaves her web of music, tuning its strings while she sings de sus compañeras obrando en las cabañas. Labrando en los campos de caña, she holds the high notes, pulling filaments taut, and when a fly's wing touches one fiber, everything vibrates. La añagaza del balance. A cat's arch and curled spine stretches into the long afternoon. Sueña con alimañas espiando de las montañas. Sueña con carne, the wiry tension of spring, and pounce on the small-boned and the broken-winged, the sneer of engaño. Deep heat of day rises like a serpent from its cool tomb, entrañado beneath the sand, leaves its tilde trace, la señal that loosens and fades, one moment sliding into centuries of terrain, el diseño antiguo del futuro. Diamond skin Culculcan, guiñando desde el cielo, slides past clouds over the edge of sun at the tip of Chichen, onto a shadow of stone, the equinox of a plumed past, the slow and brilliant tilt de los añosos. Coiled in mantillas pañosas y los llantos oscuros de añoranza, the fire eater waits for night to define the sharp outlines of his sustenance. La flama debajo de su ceño, como una piñata abriendo en una cascada de luz. Su señorada callando los ganidos desesperados de niños, eyes squeezed tight above the blackened rim of his open mouth. Ñ, the grimace of resistance, un puño contra la saña del hambre. Thank you. Thank you. And the next two are also going to be in Prairie Schooner. And then I have one more new one and one more from Trace. And then I'll hand it over. So this is called Chavela Vargas Sings La Llorona, the song La Llorona you might be familiar with from the Frida Kahlo movie, and Chavela Vargas is the old woman in the movie, really old woman who's singing the song. And as you know, La Llorona in Mexican mythos and in other Latin American countries as well, La Llorona was duped by a lover and killed her own children. And so they say that she walks the rivers, riverbeds, wailing for her lost children. And so you, like when you're a kid, if you're out past the streetlights, they say, you know, you better come home because La Llorona's gonna get you, right? Chavela Vargas's version of that song just goes right to the core. Chavela Vargas sings La Llorona. Once I heard the voice of Chavela Vargas, cigar ash in the guitar's mouth, and blood-borne croon. I learned how to hold desolation in my throat while duende slipped through me like a ghost, hung off my shoulders like a reggae reboso. Mercurial bruja floats through forests, untangling clotted hair from fallopian branches, begs us to console our sister who implored the gods and hearing no answer, did the unthinkable. Yes, she made a grave of the river, fed it her own. Now coyotes, jackals, wolves ritualize her ache, her gut shriek when they bay not at the moon, but at the raw hell hissing and crackling in every one of our desperate laments. And this one is called Bondage. I whistle as I wrestle my inner workhorse to the dirt, turn her head in the direction of blue herons and rain-wet phantoms of fog hovering above the pond. Look, I command, linger in this decomposing day. When she tries to plant her hooves, heave her weight on thick flanks, bony knees, and flee. I tie her to the lightning-cracked tree, the one still coughing ashes. No more musts, I say, stroke her mane. Rest will be her bondage until her eyes hold sackfuls of stars and never a mule escapes through her neigh. Never a devil hoists himself on her back again. Now I can barely hear the hurt in her whinny. It is but a distant bell. That was a sonnet. Okay, and then I'm going to end with the last poem from Trace. This one, I thought, you know, Ae Hee's work is so much about community and against insularity, and this poem is called Against Insularity, so I thought it might be appropriate. Let us push air into our splenetic bubbles until they contain brimming worlds we can plunge into. Blood orange skies tinged with lavender beyond the horizon we've never traversed. Across the line we've never transgressed. Time to purge our stampeding litanies, pistol-whipped plans sutured to impossible futures, manacled to metal desks and manicured lawns. Be with me a forest of deciduous trees, lizard wrinkled, century of rings rising to silver-streaked clouds. All our granular wreckage, our tin pan scraps are bursting with viridian tympany. Light the cosmic fire, feed it with lungs the size of ship's bellows, spark celestial candles. They will cluster into amethyst constellations like the lilacs we were born to be. Gracias. Thank you. Thank you.
Brenda, thank you so much. That's beautiful. Yeah, by asterism. Okay, next up, Mauricio Kilwein Guevara was born in Boyaca, Colombia, and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He has published 4 collections of poetry, and a book of translations was published in Spain. His magical realist comedy, The Last Bridge, El Último Puente, received a fully staged reading off Broadway. He taught fiction writing, poetry, and comedy for many years in the creative writing program at UW-Milwaukee. Mauricio's writing takes turns that are surprising, often jarring, from stark images of atrocity and historical injustice, articulating the various ways those in power keep, quote, inventing the monstrous world, to moments of remarkable humor, to images that are deeply surreal, yet so fully realized as to be tactile, where, quote, a book is a door to a forest, where a glazed cockroach the color of coffee appears in the narrator's white t-shirt. His poems are often imbued with a quietly propulsive momentum in lists or in narratives or in other moments of formal invention, but through this motion, which is frequently disorienting, often hilarious, sometimes downright terrifying, we're so often in company, in the presence of so many lineages with poems of, for, after, and about friends, loved ones, artists, and fellow travelers. In poems, as in life, this company offers a balm. This may be some part of what William Olson notes as, quote, a troubling beauty that gets at the difficult news with perpetual newness and hope. Please welcome Mauricio Kilwein Guevara.
Oh boy, I like happiness in this world. This is a night of happiness. Celebration, 2 wonderful young poets with early books coming into the world. I had, when you think, oh, what happened to all those years? You think about the hand. The hand that we have in changing the world in little ways, bringing a community together. And I'm proud of having one hand, and it takes many hands, that brought Brenda to UWM, that brought Ae Hee, and that a week from Thursday, I will see you here after I have a dental appointment in the morning to enjoy Djanikian, one of my favorite people. Asterism, beautiful, its book art is beautiful, and again, as I'll say here in a little review that I wrote, I can't believe how time passes. 2021. So the library asked Brenda and I to write something for things to read over winter. And so a chapbook that is embedded in Asterism was called Connotary. So I wrote this, so that's why it's in present tense. I had so much fun working for almost 40 years that I retired at 60, so this should be in the past tense now. Who's there? Look who's there. My students, what's it like to direct graduate students, masters and doctoral students and undergraduates for that matter? What's it like? Well, I just try to convey it real briefly here in a little review of Connotary. My students welcome me into their secret word kitchens as they prepare what will eventually become books, each with its own flavors and aromas. I get to taste early creations, praise with soulful hums, and sometimes make a suggestion or two. Pinch of salt. A more lemony verb? Such was the case when Ae Hee Lee was working on her dissertation, which eventually became Asterism. I'm seeing other students in the audience. This is wonderful. A playful neologism on a dictionary of connotations. And I'm going to just transition from that to a couple poems, but it's just been a joy. The poems I'm going to read are a little darker. In the old days, I always ended with like a comedy poem. Ain't going to be no comedy tonight. So here, I got to get my attempt at comedy out. Hora Latina, what does that mean? When we say Hora Latina? Latin hour. So if you say, I'll be there, Hora Latina, what does that mean? I'll be a little late. So I figured out how you say that in Spanglish. That's Latino. Just figured that out waiting for Janet to get to the car tonight. This is for the people of Gaza and any people suffering genocide. This also mentions, one other reason I picked it, it mentions Cesar Vallejo, a compatriot of Ae Hee who grew up in Trujillo, Peru. The other word for thesaurus is treasure, or tesoro. For tesoro, I mean the toddler who is in a body cast because otherwise his spine may become permanently deformed. I don't believe in God. Look at the bones of his shoulders. He is opening presents on his 3rd birthday and says thank you, but wishes the little book were a train named Thomas. For Thomas is another way to say Cesar Vallejo. I'll talk now only if I can turn away. Say this in Quechua or Arabic. There is a dead man or teenage girl on the mountains witnessed by roads. There is infinity in the skull small enough for beaks to enter. In the reflected stars, we each touch the letters hidden there. I had somebody very close to me some years ago who tried to take their life, and they made it through that difficult period. At rest, we are not merely more weary because of yesterday, we are other. Samuel Beckett. La casa arde, la abuelita se peina. Streaks of spinning planetary stones, the horse's hooves skating down the canyon path, another tourist on her back. How long will he hold his breath underwater for me? Humpback males in July, breaching halfway between Puerto Lopez e Isla de la Puerta, Isla de la Plata. How long will he hold his breath in the water for me? How long will he not live in the deaf, dark, wet mother sack? How long will he not be born? Listen to that. Nails biting into the horse's hooves. Is this the augury of the equine fetus? You ask too many questions. From now on, you may only ask one question a day. From the fish to the krill, from krill to the orange clown fish, fish to krill, krill to school, going down to the underwater depth of groundlessness. Will he kill himself for me? Shale formations in the desert, tall as twin towers, an almost unseen choza at the bottom of the canyon. In the open window, the grandmother is combing out her thick iron hair. Transistor radio battery on steel wool. This is not the United States of America or Mexico. This is not the Hopi Nation. The gray wood of the hut begins to burn while the hummingbird beside the sweet water, speckled jade breast, seems almost still. I guess what I'm worried most about is, my life is a vacillation between happiness, boredom, and worry. And not worry for me, but for everything that's vulnerable. So Janet and I have this place that Ae Hee and Daniel and I made empanadas at. They were delicious, and we loved them. And then we said afterwards, yeah, but the lard is it's heavy. That's why we don't make them every week. And we're at the end of a beautiful little street called Sunset Lane, looking out on Green Bay. Green Bay is named after an island called Green Island, and you can see it from the bay. And Silurian was a geological period when the Niagara Escarpment, which goes pretty much from where I grew up in Pittsburgh all the way up to Niagara Falls, up into Canada, and ends around Green Bay. It's escarpment. I had to look it up. It's French for slope it, which makes sense because you have these steep geological formations. So I was thinking back to that historical geological time, and also this takes place during the period of the pandemic, and it's that the babies are just a symbol for everything that's tender. Silurian. The same morning that we climbed the steep road, the whitetail, fallow hide, branching skull, rocketed to higher ground. That native morning, beside sunflower fields, 3 old women, they wore surgical masks and blue gloves, stopped at a safe distance. Their eyes were scouring ours. There, I heard the smallest say, fingers shaking toward the Niagara Escarpment, which was everywhere. Our babies, said the second of the 3, crow's feet walking when she blinked. In those woods, said the third, inhaling through the robin egg paper cloth. What kind of babies? I asked as I returned a centipede to the miniature forest. All kinds, said the woman with the accent and hoarse cough. Canela, ebony, or coral, like Pompeii. Humankind, breathing, said the smallest of the trio, fierce, whose wrist rang with palsy. On the same afternoon of the sun through the Silurian Sea, my companion pointed below to 3 deer carcasses, hoops of lightning rising out of the lime-rich soil, umbra of John Crow feathers. 400 million years later, a neon pink sunset, the last of the pileated drumming, the naked cries from the basin. We descended like scorpions, unbarred, sidestepping to keep from hurtling down. Breaths of sunflowers firing all those vacant mansions. Anybody know who Crispus Attucks was? Crispus Attucks was an American whaler. You know, we never were taught history in school, and take your teachers to task for that. Crispus Attucks was an American whaler, sailor, and stevedore, or dock worker, of African and native descent. So of mixed blood, African and native, who is traditionally regarded as the first person killed in the Boston Massacre, and as a result, the first American killed in the American Revolution. So now when you hear, this is kind of a dense poem with a lot of historical stuff in it, but at least when you hear Crispus Attucks, you say, I know who that is. John Crowfeather is I think it's a Caribbean term for buzzard or vulture. I'm fascinated with, one of my mother's friends said, why do all your poems have cucarachas and vultures and ratas? And I said, I don't know. I'm tired of pretty things. I'm tired of things getting ignored. John Crowfeather. This is another Door County poem, a Green Bay poem. Had the trio of whitetail been pushed over the escarpment, a feather blew out of the loam. It lodged puncture point into the stacked limestone threatening the side of the world. Turkey vulture, its other names are circle, aura purifier, solitary feather in the stevedore of Crispus Attucks. Afro aves, a new world feather, John Crowfeather, Isabella's fanning the brow of her drowsing infant. Pen is from the Latin for feather. By capillary action, a quill wrote the death sentence of Andrés Cuevas of Cartagena de Indias in 1614, when Andrés Cuevas of Cartagena de Indias in 1614 became the first auto da fe in Nuevo Reino de Granada. A few years later, White Lion docked at Point Comfort, heavy with cargo. Every day, my companion builds a 4-sided tower entirely of buzzard feathers and polished jade lake glass. But I would be the happiest thief alive if I were close enough to hear that native bird above Green Island, breathing and rocking side to side, circling on the thermal breeze. And one final poem. Ae Hee once told me that she liked this book, and then I really liked it. So this is for Ae Hee, Behind the Stove. This is as close as you get to a happy poem tonight. And Ae totally happy. Behind the stove, but it is a little strange, so come on, join me. In those days, I could make myself as small as a seed. I followed the anxious cucaracha so closely she thought I was her moon shadow or lover. She was in search of a perfect place. She loved to zip into the darkness of my father's box of books. She adored the smell of Huxley and Dickinson and Piaget's red wine dust jacket. When my brothers were asleep, she slipped behind the stove and into the walls, where I saw mice and dust and rivers and coke furnaces and the long glass coolers at the Allegheny County morgue. The inner walls of the projects were endless. I saw barges with coal like pyramids. I saw badgers and a dead black bear beside the road where St. Bernard of Clairvaux was singing and walking through the snowfall. I saw my mother's father signing papers in Chile. I was walking through a maze of grapevines with the purple fruit hanging in clusters the shape of South America. I saw my other grandfather dying of cancer under a sheet with his eyes closed and his dirty glasses on. Or was I a yellow canary flying through a mine? When the cucaracha stopped, I stopped. She tipped her thorax toward the seam of a gas pipe. We laid a string of perfect eggs. It was already done. Thank you very much.
Mauricio, thank you so much. Okay. Originally from the west side of Chicago, Olatunde Osinaike is a Nigerian-American poet, essayist, and software developer. He's the author of Tender-Headed, Makeshik Books, selected by Camille Rankin as winner of the 2022 National Poetry Series. His collection was also runner-up for the Cave Canem Poetry Prize and finalist for the Alice James Award and CAAPP Book Prize. Well-deserved. Other honors include winner of the Lucille Clifton Poetry Prize and a Frontier Industry Prize, semi-finalist for the 92Y Discovery Poetry Prize, and honorable mention for the Plowshares Emerging Writers Award in Poetry. His work has received fellowships and support from Poets and Writers, Hurston Wright Foundation, Kenyon Review, Writers Workshop, and the Institute for the Study of Global Racial Justice at Rutgers University. And the poems in Tender-Headed interrogate received ideas of masculinity. Quote, I can attest that men learn to play men from men still learning. Forms of systemic harm and endemic violence, and do so much more besides. And they do so with wide formal range, from concrete to lyric, from lucid and almost essayistic diction to a more fractured language that finds deeper grooves in the juxtapositions of idea and line, playing with the space of the page and the space of thought unfolding, and always employing a rich musicality to sound out each moment's sonic contours, as Camille Rankin notes, quote, this work is nimble, a two-step on a tight wire, tender-headed grooves and shines, holds us wide awake and mesmerized. And this music also is a way to create a further connection, to bring the audience into this rich conversation, the rich conversation of the book. As Joshua Bennett says, Osinaike understands that poems are social occasions, that they find new life once given over to the air. And there is air everywhere in this boundless book, in breath, in ascension, in song. Please join me in welcoming Olatunde Osinaike.
Hello, everyone. I won't be long. I won't be brief. So I met Ae Hee in the Poets and Writers inaugural Get the Word Out poetry cohort. And when she invited me to read for her book launch, I thought of the first accolade you'd want for any of your poetry, is to honor memory. I think the second that follows very closely is to cherish memory, and I think of the person that Ae Hee is. I don't want to cry, but it took a lot for me to write these poems, but even more to believe that there's a community out there that recognizes warmth. And I think that there's no better member of community than Ae Hee. When I was in those spaces with her, you can clap for that, because so it's, I think it's an extreme honor to be here. I don't take it lightly. I actually remember when I first read your poetry, when I was first really getting into poetry from, I guess, an academic space. I was reading Bull City Press work, and I was admiring a lot of writers from afar with the Speak Easy project and things of that nature. So you don't actually know how your work has affected me, shivering. But I think that you deserve a lot, and that book is amazing. Speaking as a person that is still learning his own language, the book does a lot to warrant attention toward interrogation, which I think, I'm in pursuit of with even this book, but to just write alongside you in this world and be present as you are with those that you encounter. It's not lost on me. I don't know if anyone says that to you, but it's not lost on me. It's not lost on our cohort, I'm sure. So yeah, thank you for allowing me to be here. I'm gonna read some poems as I had a book come out. So yeah, the first one is called White Noise. That I choose love at all, that is more honest than I care to share. For dominoes to fall with all those black bullets makes every sense, as if the sum of our parts mean our parts separate yet equal. I can drive daisies across state lines. I can parallel park, but I cannot bury the music. It trembles like static. I took the tip of a cotton swab to it and went too deep, drummed the beaten path with words that tailed a blimp in the sky, and the next day it said, America is better than this. Mistakes were made. Now is the time. Reading my lips, you said, this must be a joke. How could it be that there were those who had rested and then there was me? Yeah, I'm only going to read some poems. A lot of the poems I'm going to read, I actually haven't, Joshua mentions poems are of social occasion, and I have a friend in the audience, Wan Suk Song. Yeah, that guy. But I came up through spoken word, and an attribute of spoken word and that I find eerily similar to Ae Hee's work. I think about in Lucille Clifton's poem, why people sometimes be mad at me, Again, speaking about memory and what it might mean to allow your memory to linger longer than that which is perceived of you. So I'm going to read some poems having to do with faith, because my faith was enlarged when I read your work. So yeah, escalator talk. And I do a bit of back and forth. I didn't bring any Post-it notes, so give me a second. Much like a bevy of elevator speeches uncommitted to memory, I find my words funded by cocktails of circumstance along the way. My next steps like bevels built to mellow in lockstep onto a floor vast with chores and lingo that skips along. Up and down, the day trades my energy for its day raise, my last breath for the cost of the growing rate plus interest. I have a theory. Lazarus was indeed black and unarmed like us. Irresistible. I can prove it took about everything in Mary and Martha just to open an investigation. Petitions, partitions of prayers, just under 96 hours, and the news still hasn't come. They have indicted no one. This is the way injustice happens, as they say, character is who you are when no one is watching. I haven't broken character, but that's what this felt like. Sharp as it harps us human with ache, shock, and grand awe, my mind is made up. Parable full of first. Jesus wept while at the altar watching his favorite people wed, not by sight, but by the element of surprise. Sheets of rain like linen or cake stomped the turf like a trouble he knew well. Alpha and Omega gave toast, were so drunk that no one could grasp what they had said. Each emotion was seconded that night, and as they listened to one-hit wonders and warped their speech through liquid vowels and hiccups, the first stance was more of a mess than anyone could have predicted. Sloppy copies of themselves as the music took them for a test drive. If you can believe it, everyone had to drive stick shift home or catch a ride with a stranger savvy enough to sift through stop signs. Thankfully, there were no accidents. Only mortal commandments sent like, "Did you make it home safely?" Or, "I'd rather you stay over than end up somewhere you couldn't start fresh from." The next morning, everything felt new and due, like jury duty or mixed signals, like the point of no return, but with a softness like that of a cushion, like the gap a baby's tooth dreams up when it departs. An endeavor toward a gift of trust. All they could talk about was the rehearsal dinner and the brown snowfall that miracled and speckled after they scrubbed the butter onto bread burned, but soaked in what abided. I remember. It was on a Tuesday. They were all making their way to Wednesday with to-dos piling up for Thursday. They were not even on Friday's mind, but everyone was in love. Everyone was in love. Okay, so the book is, I mentioned interrogation. I don't separate myself from the speaker in the poems, which is to say, when I say tender-headed, which is a term taken from the Black barbershop, I'm also thinking about the things I flinch at, things I am vulnerable in sight of, despite of. I'm a Black man, so I'm thinking about the underbelly, the underside of what it is to be Black in this world and the privilege that comes with being a man in this world. So I'm going to read the proem. I've made it my point to read it during each reading as a point of calibration. So, men like me. Boys will be boys. Manly, slick, elbow grease, baritones, singing low, unruly, higher than a hierarchy, inherit, plausible deniability, disorder, bachelors and awful apostles, dark nights, concaved like a character arc, compensate, compensation, deafen a suffrage, sulk, storm cellars, the fragrance of kingdoms, ladybug and don't believe, much in luck, believe in overstaying a welcome, will name anything after us, detention sensors and muscle cars, squad, thumb through classifieds, flashing lights, shock value, slide hands in the slow close of an elevator door, door stoppers, stop things, won't. Or up the rhetorical like it's the home team, shoot the shot to blame the angle, blame things, see floral print and scurry, see flowers like flowers hold both water and scent, sent some heaven sent a good morning text this week, gossip but call that barbershop talk, double meaning, deprecating, duffel bag crazy, colonialized, call that authority, monopolize until it's good guys, tough guys, all of the above. Treat all we touch like tungsten, can't temper anything, love a melting point, get physical, have a problem with the word no. Yes, men, have more than just a problem with the word no. Antsy with violence, prefer a seat or stall between us and another, stick up for and subjugate it to nothing, jog memories for fun, jog freely at night, night and day, interrogate, bastard, blue, everything, culture, coercion, night and day, interrogate, bastard, blue, everything, culture, coercion, hate to admit it, with tailored suits, soot and tie, checker, call it, chess, don't call it, control, call it, like a time of death, a flat tire, said with our chest, repeat what's been said before, but in a tone, society, love, hate, being adjacent to the action, hate, keep that, invest, keep that, in hotbeds and chit-chat, men of the house, our own men, might not start it, but will end it, love, when we aren't followed or replaced, love, having the last word, so we take it wherever we go, front lines, confessional booths, prenups, shotgun weddings, law and order reruns, board rooms, proms, distilleries, salary negotiations, horror films, Oval Offices, on air. Okay, so I'm only gonna read a couple more poems and then we can get to the star. I'm gonna read two poems that remind me of family. They're the only nation that matters. So thank you for that reminder, Ae Hee. Yeah. Serendipity. Potent as an exhale, I am telling you I don't need good luck to make riddance of any unrequited bounty. I am more than I intended to be, which is to say, I acquired the taste of things hoped for on accident. As a result, I made a mannerism out of faith, out of picking up disposed petals like one would a jewel. There is no greater love than that which becomes of us after we are on our knees, bunny-eared shoelaces or a proposal. Speaking of which, I have chiseled one to sing, of which I'll concede that when I do question what it means to be sacred, I suppose that is my funny way of asking about even the softest parts of me which have been grazed through the years. I suppose I am not ashamed of my mistakes the same way a body is humbled by the dirt that sticks, the fragrant dents indulging, the auspicious spine healing, its palmy preservation just as slick as a squad. How when I say squad, I mean gang. How when I say gang, I mean psalms so sharp with mercy, it is becoming harder for me to neglect how suds want nothing more than for our bodies to ask them to stay the night. How romantic would that be? Last poem. Sometimes I forget to say grace. You have been here before. The bread baking, then breaking, then the second wind. The evening out over the squeeze of hunched shoulders. The batter in the bellies of those who think the Lord implied what's understood doesn't need to be explained, but what have you done with your 5 loaves lately? Nothing. I have multiplied nothing but my restlessness. I am in the business of brisk surrenders and blindfolds I can unhand if and where I see fit. The perfect crime is the one in which no one is caught fidgeting with the foil. I am not keen on taking down my own statements, but I do so after I get a snoop at my want. And the heat rises. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. That's wonderful. Okay. You all know Ae Hee Lee, but I'm still gonna let you know a little something. Born in South Korea and raised in Peru, Ae Hee Lee currently lives in Wisconsin. Lucky us. In addition to Asterism, she's the author of the poetry chapbooks Bedtime, Riverbed, Dear Bear, and Connotary, also out front. So, Ae Hee is a Just Buffalo Literary Center Fellow, an Adroit Journal Gregory Djanikian Scholar, a recipient of the James Olney Award by the Southern Review, and a Ruth, Lilly, and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Poetry Fellowship finalist. She has also received scholarships and honors from the Academy of American Poets, AWP, Loaf, Sewanee Writers Conference, and the Palm Beach Poetry Festival, among others. And here's where you're going to get a little echo of what Brenda had to say about Asterism, which, I mean, I should just reread that, but no, enough wonderful things, good things can't be said about this wonderful book. So. The title of Ae Hee's new collection, Asterism, may refer to a pattern of stars observed by the naked eye, the imaging and imagining of a possible whole through adjacent parts. This is so appropriate to Asterism, as Asterism explores a set of constellated experiences which themselves tessellate, interlock the shape of each poem in its own unique delineation, some narrative, some lyric, almost surreal, often deeply personal and rooted in memories of a specific time and place, yet at once transnational, extending across geographies, compassing and encompassing worlds of experience. But there's a through line. It all seems part of a pattern, if not one that can be defined or apprehended with ease. Poems meeting, quote, at the edge of every edge, and, as Wendy Chen notes, quote, carrying us into constellations of possibilities and light. And doing so, all the while, through vivid imagery, visceral textures and sensory experience, sussing out the taste at once of the physical, quote, place nestled inside the palate, and the linguistic, quote, I could savor the second a violet turned violent in my radiant mouth. Asterism is a varied yet remarkably cohesive collection that is, by turns, intimate and expansive, as John Murillo notes, quote, Asterism is a collection of both grace and grit, the work of a mind at work, in and on a world that is simultaneously expanding and contracting. Ae Hee, thank you for being here, for celebrating this book with us, and for arranging this reading, which has been wonderful and will continue to be wonderful for the next several minutes.
Hello. Thank you for being here. When I was putting this collection together, I was thinking a lot about belonging and how it's not really a fixed thing. It's something that expands, not just with like going every time you go to a new country or community, but just like meeting people, encounters, and just learning about the world. I think it's something that moves, and I think it has just proven true every time, and especially today too, as I just celebrate this with people who are so dear to me and new friends who have become very dear to me. And if just thinking like non-linearly, because time is not linear, I think this book wouldn't exist without any of you, like even you who I've met today. So thank you for being here. I also know that my parents, my family, who is in Peru, might be watching this. So, and they don't speak English, but they're still watching. And I just want to say, 엄마 아빠 사랑해요. 고마워요. And Daniel, thank you for putting up with me. I also have been doing this thing where I start out with a deep breath and just inviting people to take a deep breath with me. So go ahead. Self-portrait as portrait. Dearest you, I suspect we were made tentatively, an exact assemblage of organs, emotions, complete with little phantom pains. When your Korean was young, you asked your father not to call you an ingan, human, because you didn't know what the word meant. But now, every day we meet at the edge of every edge, our ankles frail for touching. Together, we're an unhyphenated, indefinite country, not culture, not skin, clumsy geese of 3 wings, one for ourselves, one for the world, one for strangeness. Surely, some will continue to call us inconvenient. We won't forget all beautiful things are. Inheritance as invocation, because there is pleasure in secrecy. I kneel in silence before a kitchen cabinet. I pull out the large can of sesame oil inhabiting this corner of the house. I remove the cap, bring my nose closer to the opening. The rim glistens, copper, the smell of an unfamiliar soil. A country I was born to but didn't grow up with. I breathe it in. I breathe out, 고소하다. This is still a word I cannot translate until it evaporates. At times, my mother tells me about my father, sets afloat hushed fairy tales into the waters of my nights. She explains, my father is a lidded well, a closed circle of arms, thumb leaning on thumb. How as the 8th son, no one expected him to survive the winter. How he lives holding a birth date that migrates with the moon. Can you love what you don't know? I glance at the edge of a mirror, a crystal caught in my cornea. Maybe the unknown is but a hard mirage of what's known, a questionable carbon copy of the seer's mind. My curiosity draws me to this displaced image, selects from it. My parents' nostalgia expands it infinitely like a prism. I want to love what what I don't know. I want to learn, allow myself this yearning. A homeland of mountains with low, uneven shoulders. In the distance, their outlines are plumed as if made from torn paper. A homeland of electric forest, persimmons, and expired peppermint candies in the shape of diamonds. This land wasn't promised to me, but my memories opened their palms. They claim nothing as their own. They invoke, they let go. You have your father's face, an aunt told me once. A camel's long eyelashes and dark stars for eyes. I admit my father has passed on to me many of his idiosyncrasies, the closing of hands behind his back, the bottling of desire until it bursts into 1,000 iridescent needles of glass. But when I visit his old house in Chungju, I don't call it home. I glimpse a pair of cosmos flowers resting their heads against half-finished steps, caress their purple ears, and ask if they'll remember me from time to time. I return to myself, broken and full. Upon practicing a second language, while Korean is my first language, Spanish kind of also became my first language almost simultaneously, so English is technically my second language, so that's what I'm referring to. Upon practicing a second language, I understood speech as a manner of wind. Voice could be voiceless, place nestled inside palate, the dark side of teeth, or throats deep. When I couldn't parse ooh from root and foot, ears and letters showed themselves dragonflies, lured young by the smell of sap, hardened within splintering amber. In the end, I chose to laugh when I repeated dessert, driven mad with intention, until I found out what word I truly craved. Like this, I dropped my words into wishing wells, not believing it at waste. Some days I noticed that to delight in the whimsy of meaning could also be a sign I was lonely, wanting to be, wanting to long. But I was happy too. I could savor the second at violet turned violent in my radiant mouth. And this poem is for my childhood friend Katia, Alejandra is her second name, so Alejandra. Bougainvillea as papelillos. Alejandra says she doesn't believe in discovery, only in encounters, and that she wants to introduce me to a bougainvillea bush down the street. She leads us past white window gates from colonial times that look like ornate bird cages, and I don't ask out loud whether a single dust particle has remained in place since I left Trujillo years ago. She points, smiling. Look, the branches of papelillos are over there, hugging the sky. They are the color of our mornings here, of light, shivering in fog, busy with petals that are not petals, but leaves holding invisible flowers. We don't stand too close. We don't interrupt the rustle of paper chalices above our heads. We wait until under the lattice shade. Stay still to understand what it means to sway. Bless you. A short one. Home remedies. For bee stings, my parents would rub a spoonful of doenjang on my skin until scabbed. For burns, they wrung the aloe vera in our backyard for its tears. For scraped knees, a song. Sana, sana, colita de rana. Si no sana soy, sanarás mañana. Promised me all tadpole tails grew back, eventually. For homesickness, I crooned the same song. It didn't work. I found out then the ability to heal diminishes with age. But it mattered little. I sang anyway. So this poem is called Green Card as evidence of adequate means of financial support, and evidence of adequate means of financial support is a form you fill out for when you're applying the green card. I needed money. There's no poetic way to say this. Even so, when you touched my face, brought my cheeks to the nook of your neck, I burrowed into it, a firefly seeking shelter from winter far underground. Then you told me there's no application form that can hold the entirety of a life because our days constantly spill like wine. Imagine that, you said. Apricot tones all over the page. You told me about ferns bejeweled with jade dew, their cold fiddleheads full of unfulfilled, twirling futures. And I forgot about my fixation with earning people's respect, among other things for which I'd been told it was proper to plead until granted. You told me if immigrants could enrich a country, you didn't want to know our melting point and whether we would shine brighter than gold. You told me how I could stop confusing belonging with belongings, good with goods, by sharing the way our hearts continue to beat, resilient, even without an assurance of worth. You told me there can be solace in a dead end, in knowing the sea still collapses, still runs and soars, carrying its broken shells somewhere out there. Then you buried a kiss in the dark earth of my hair. I believed it all. What else could I do? And I'll just end with this poem, which Woodland Better was so kind to share under social media, in the belief that nothing really goes away. It just changes, and change can be beautiful too. It can be sad, but it can be beautiful too if we let it. I'm not very good to letting it. But I want to believe it. When a language is said to be lost or prodigal, it's really underway. This is the principle of mass conservation, that memory can be exhausted into feathery gray ashes, but the mind, like hair, can't help but absorb, carry the smell of smoke wherever it goes. Belonging splits easier than an atom into being, longing, and language, yes. I have known it to erode into dust, but also birth a new mountain within the mouth. Thank you. And thank you, Willa Patter. Thank you.
And, yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. Ae Hee, Olatunde, Brenda, Mauricio, thank you so much. Everyone here, thank you so much out there. Incredible. I just want to say, well, thank you. But also, if you're in the room with us, or if you can make it here quickly, you know, if you're out there, feel free to stick around. We have empanadas, we have other refreshments, we have, of course, wonderful company. So have a good night, everybody. Thank you. And books, including Asterism. So, all right.